When my husband died, I lost more than a partner. I lost my home, my family, and the last bit of protection I had in this world. I thought our families would support me and my children. But instead, they turned their backs. My husband's family didn't even let me grieve. They came like vultures, and stole everything he left behind. The house, the land, even his clothes. And my own parents? They told me, there's no space for you here. Not for me. Not for my children. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from nothing, stay with me. This story of betrayal, survival, and triumph might just give you the strength to keep fighting. The oak tree in our front yard was James's pride. He'd planted it the day we moved into our home, saying it would grow alongside our family. Strong, steady roots, just like the life we were building together. I remember the morning of the accident as deceptively ordinary. James kissed me goodbye, ruffled our son Ethan's hair, and scooped up our daughter Maya for their special butterfly kiss ritual, eyelashes fluttering against each other's cheeks. He promised to be home early for Maya's 7th birthday dinner. Don't forget the strawberry ice cream, I called after him. Never, he smiled, that dimple appearing in his left cheek. It's tradition. Those were the last words we shared. The knock came at 3:17 p.m. 2 police officers with solemn faces. Words that didn't make sense: accident, instantaneous, sorry for your loss. The world collapsed around me, but I couldn't collapse with it. Not with Maya's small hand clutching mine, her birthday dress still laid out on the bed. Not with 9-year-old Ethan standing frozen in the hallway, his father's baseball cap still perched on his head from their morning catch. In the days that followed, I moved through funeral arrangements in a fog. James's parents flew in from Arizona. My own parents drove the 3 hours from their retirement community. Friends brought casseroles that piled up untouched in the refrigerator. I fielded calls, accepted hugs, and somehow kept breathing when my lungs felt filled with concrete. What I didn't understand then was that grief wasn't the only battle I would face. That sometimes, loss reveals the true nature of those around you, and not everyone rises to the occasion. The first sign came a week after the funeral. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was sitting at our kitchen table, my father-in-law Robert beside her. I'd just put the children to bed after another evening of tears and whispered reassurances. We need to discuss practical matters, Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice crisp as the freshly ironed handkerchief she clutched. Can't this wait? I asked, exhaustion seeping through every pore. I haven't even. James would want us to handle things properly, Robert interrupted. The house, for instance. I poured myself a cup of coffee, more for something to hold than from any desire to drink it. What about the house? Eleanor exchanged a glance with Robert before continuing. Well, as you know, this house has been in the family for generations. This wasn't exactly true. James and I had purchased the Victorian fixer-upper ourselves 7 years ago, but his parents had contributed to the down payment with the understanding that this investment was for their grandchildren's future. We're concerned about your ability to maintain the property, Robert added. The mortgage, the taxes, it's substantial. James had life insurance, I said. And I'll be going back to work. We'll manage. Eleanor's lips thinned. Dear, be reasonable. You were a part-time art teacher. That barely covered groceries when James was alive. The conversation deteriorated from there. What began as concerns quickly revealed themselves as plans. Plans they'd apparently discussed between themselves while I was selecting my husband's casket. They believed the house should be sold, with proceeds primarily returning to them for their investment. They thought the children would be better off in Arizona with them, where Maya and Ethan could have stability. This is their home, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Their friends are here, their school, their memories of their father. Memories won't pay bills, Robert said flatly. I thought it was grief talking. That they were reaching for control in an uncontrollable situation. I was wrong. 2 days later, I returned from enrolling the children in grief counseling to find Eleanor supervising movers who were wrapping James's antique desk, a wedding gift for my parents. What are you doing? I asked, stunned. Cataloging James's belongings, she replied without looking up from her clipboard. Some things should stay in the family. We are his family, I said. Her eyes met mine, cold and assessing. Of course, dear. But certain heirlooms, his grandfather's watch, his collection of first editions, these have sentimental value to us. They have sentimental value to his children, I countered. Eleanor smiled thinly. Children break things. It was the beginning of a calculated pillaging. While I was arranging for bereavement leave from my teaching position, they were meeting with an attorney. While I was holding Maya through night terrors, they were inventorying the house. While I was trying to explain to Ethan why Daddy wasn't coming back, they were changing the beneficiaries on accounts I didn't even know existed. I learned about the will, or rather, the lack of a proper one, during a meeting Eleanor arranged at their attorney's office. James and I had basic documents drawn up years ago, but had postponed finalizing comprehensive estate planning until things settled down. Life with young children was always moving at lightning speed. There was always next month, next year. But now next year would never come, and the outdated will left ambiguities that James's parents exploited with surgical precision. As co-signers on the property, we have certain rights, Robert explained as the attorney nodded along. Given the financial realities you're facing, Sarah, the sensible solution is to liquidate. We're offering to purchase your interest in the house directly, Eleanor added, as if this demonstrated remarkable generosity. You'll have enough to start fresh somewhere more manageable. I looked at the figure they'd written on a slip of paper. It was less than a quarter of the home's value in the current market. This isn't fair, I said, my voice barely audible. Fair. Robert's voice sharpened. Was it fair that we lost our only son? That his children will grow up without their father? Life isn't fair, Sarah. I turned to the attorney, hoping for some semblance of professional ethics. They can't just take the children's home. He glanced at Eleanor before responding. Mrs. Bennet, the financial entanglements here are complex. Without clear documentation of intent, the courts tend to recognize blood relations and financial contributions. A lengthy legal battle would deplete whatever resources you're hoping to protect. It was only later that I discovered he wasn't an impartial advisor, he was their family attorney. When I tried to contact our bank, I learned that Robert had already been there, presenting himself as the executor of James's estate. Accounts were frozen, pending resolution of estate matters. When I called the life insurance company, I was told the policy had been changed 3 years ago during a company restructuring. The primary beneficiary was now a trust controlled by James's parents, with a small portion allocated to the children for education. I never saw that money. Within a month of James's death, I was served eviction papers. The locks on our home had been changed the day before, while I was at a parent-teacher conference discussing how to support Ethan through his grief at school. We returned to find our belongings, what remained of them, piled on the front lawn. James's clothes were gone. His books. The family photos had been removed from their frames, the frames themselves deemed household furnishings that belonged with the property. The mighty oak tree James had planted was visible from the sidewalk where we stood, my children clutching my hands as neighbors pretended not to watch our humiliation. Why can't we go home, Mommy? Maya asked, her voice small. I had no answer that made sense. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the people who should love her most, her grandparents, had decided their grief entitled them to steal her security? With nowhere else to turn, I called my parents. They had never fully approved of James. He was too unreliable, too artistic, not the doctor or lawyer they'd envisioned for their only daughter. But surely now, they would step up. Blood would prove thicker than disappointment. We just don't have the space, Sarah, my mother said, her voice distant through the phone. The guest room is being renovated, and your father needs his study for his writing. You know how he gets when his routine is disrupted. Mom, we're talking about your grandchildren, I said, disbelief coloring every word. We have nowhere to go. There are services, she replied. Government programs. I'm sure if you explain your situation. My father got on the line then. Sarah, you chose this life against our advice. James never provided the security we wanted for you. Now you need to be practical. Get back on your feet, and then we can discuss visits with the children. They sent a check for $500 with a note that read, for temporary accommodations. As if my family's homelessness was a minor inconvenience, like a delayed flight or a plumbing issue. That night, the 3 of us slept in our car in the parking lot of Maya's elementary school. I held them close in the back seat, whispering stories about brave explorers and magical adventures, pretending this was just another of life's experiences. Inside, I was shattered. The next morning, I washed our faces in the school bathroom before the janitor arrived. I brushed Maya's hair and straightened Ethan's collar, determined they would maintain their dignity even as mine crumbled. I called in sick to my teaching job, then spent the day making calls from the public library. The women's shelter had a 3-week waiting list. Affordable apartments required first and last month's rent plus security deposits, money I no longer had access to. Extended stay motels cost more per week than I earned in a month. Every door seemed locked, every path forward blocked by the practical realities of sudden poverty. Finally, a social worker named Diane found us space at a family shelter across town. It's not ideal, she warned, but it's clean, and they have a program for families in transition. The shelter was housed in a converted elementary school. Our room was formerly a classroom, now divided by partitions into sections for 4 families. Our space contained 2 narrow cots and a small dresser. The bathroom was communal. Meals were served at specific times in the cafeteria. There was a strict curfew and mandatory participation in financial literacy and job readiness programs. "This is just temporary," I promised the children that first night, as they lay wide-eyed on their shared cot. "Just until Mommy figures things out." Ethan, always too perceptive for his age, simply nodded. "Dad would understand," he said, and my heart cracked anew. The days at the shelter blurred together. I woke at 5 a.m. to secure bathroom time before the morning rush. I got the children ready for school, walking them the 1.5 miles because we couldn't afford bus fare. Then I rushed to my teaching job, grateful the administration had been understanding about my housing transition, as I carefully phrased it. After school, I picked up the children, helped with homework in the shelter's common room, then worked evenings cleaning offices while Maya and Ethan stayed in the shelter's childcare program. On weekends, I took on sewing alterations, a skill my grandmother had insisted I learn, for extra cash. Every penny went into a small lockbox I kept hidden in my coat. Every tiny increment bringing us one step closer to escape. The other shelter residents became unlikely sources of strength. There was Mariana, who had fled domestic violence with her toddler and taught me how to stretch a handful of ingredients into meals that felt like abundance. There was Tomas, an elderly man who had lost his home to medical bills but spent his days teaching Ethan chess and telling Maya stories in the courtyard. "You have fire in you," Mariana told me one night as we sat on the shelter steps after the children were asleep. "I see it when you think nobody's looking." "I don't feel very fiery," I admitted, bone-weary from another 18-hour day. "Fire doesn't always show as flames," she said, her eyes reflecting the streetlights. "Sometimes it's the quiet heat that keeps the coals alive through the night. Your children see it. They know you won't let them freeze in this world." Those words sustained me through the hardest days, when Maya came home crying because a classmate had made fun of her unwashed hair, when Ethan got into a fight defending her honor, when I had to choose between laundry money and the ingredients for cupcakes for Maya's classroom birthday celebration. We lived in the shelter for 7 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. Every night, I lay awake planning, calculating, strategizing. Every morning, I woke with renewed determination. I took on more cleaning jobs. I started tutoring students in art and literature on Sunday afternoons at the library. I sold handmade cards at the local farmers market. The social worker Diane connected me with a non-profit that helped with first month's rent for a tiny 2-bedroom apartment above a convenience store. The neighborhood wasn't ideal. Sirens were our nightly lullaby, but it was ours. We moved in with our few remaining possessions plus donations from the shelter community. Mismatched dishes, secondhand clothes, a wobbly table, and beds that consisted of mattresses on the floor. "Our castle," I declared on moving day, spinning in the center of the nearly empty living room until Maya giggled. Ethan touched the walls cautiously, as if afraid they might dissolve. "Do we get to stay here?" he asked, the uncertainty in his voice revealing how deeply our instability had wounded him. "Yes," I promised. "This is our home now." That first night, I made a simple dinner of pasta with tomato sauce, a luxury after months of shelter meals. We ate sitting on the floor around our donated table, and I asked each child to share one hope for our new beginning. "I want to join the basketball team," Ethan said, surprising me. He'd always been bookish like his father, preferring chess to sports. "I thought you didn't like basketball," I said. He shrugged, suddenly looking older than his 10 years. "Dad told me once that basketball taught him to stand tall, even when people tried to knock him down. I think I need that now." Maya twirled her pasta thoughtfully. "I want to be a lawyer," she announced. A lawyer, I echoed. At 8, her career ambitions changed weekly, ranging from astronaut to veterinarian to professional butterfly catcher. She nodded solemnly. So I can help people like us. So nobody can take someone's house away just because they're sad and scared. I looked at my children, these small beings who had witnessed the worst of human nature yet somehow distilled from it a determination to be better, to do better, and felt a surge of fierce pride cutting through my exhaustion. My hope, I said, reaching for their hands across our makeshift dinner table, is that we remember that home isn't the walls around us. It's the love between us. And that can never be taken away. The years that followed weren't easy. I worked multiple jobs while pursuing an online degree to increase my teaching credentials. There were nights I didn't eat so the children could have proper meals. There were winters when we all slept in the same bed to conserve heating costs. There were humiliations large and small, applying for food assistance, accepting charity backpacks at school registration, explaining to the children why we couldn't participate in activities that required fees or equipment. But there were triumphs too. Ethan's determination on the basketball court translated into a confidence that changed him from within. His initial awkwardness gave way to a natural athleticism that caught his coach's attention. By high school, he was starting point guard and had found a brotherhood among his teammates that helped fill the void his father's death had left. Maya's declaration about becoming a lawyer wasn't a passing fancy. She joined the debate club in middle school, volunteered at the legal aid clinic in high school, and eventually earned a scholarship to the state university to study pre-law. I'm going to specialize in family estate law, she told me during her freshman year. So I can protect people like us. As for me, I eventually earned my master's degree in education and secured a full-time position teaching art at the high school. I started a small side business creating commissioned paintings, rediscovering the artistic passion I had set aside during our years of survival. Our apartment above the convenience store was replaced by a modest rental house, then eventually by a small home of our own, purchased with a mortgage bearing only my name. The oak tree James planted remained on property I no longer had access to, but I had taught our children to plant their own roots, to grow toward the light even after enduring storms. 10 years after James's death, as Maya prepared to leave for college and Ethan considered athletic scholarships, the past came knocking again, quite literally. I opened our front door one Sunday afternoon to find Eleanor and Robert standing on our porch. They looked older, diminished somehow. Robert leaned heavily on a cane. Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice lacking its former authority. May we come in? I hesitated, protective instincts flaring. Why are you here? We'd like to see our grandchildren, Robert said. It's been too long. That wasn't my choice, I replied evenly. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since James's funeral. We know. We made terrible mistakes. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I called the children to the door and let them decide. Ethan, now a tall, confident 19-year-old, stood with his arms crossed, a deliberate barrier between these strangers and his sister. You're our grandparents? Maya asked, her voice measured in the way I recognized from her debate competitions. Yes, Eleanor said eagerly. We've missed you both so much. That's interesting, Maya replied. Because we needed you. After Dad died, we had nothing. We lived in a shelter. Mom worked 3 jobs. Where were you then? Robert looked away. We were wrong, he admitted quietly. Grief made us selfish. Mom wasn't grieving? Ethan challenged. We weren't grieving? I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension beneath my fingers. It's okay, Eth. It's not okay, he said, but his voice softened at my touch. But it's in the past. We didn't welcome them into our family that day. Instead, we agreed to meet on neutral ground, a restaurant the following weekend, to see if any relationship could be salvaged. I did this not for Eleanor and Robert, but for my children, so they could make their own informed choices about forgiveness. My own parents reached out around the same time, having heard through mutual acquaintances about Ethan's basketball success and Maya's scholarship. Their overture came in the form of a congratulatory card with a check, as if financial support now could erase years of absence. What should I do with this? I asked the children, showing them the check. Maya considered it thoughtfully. Donate it, she decided, to the shelter that took us in. Ethan nodded in agreement. Tell them thanks, but we already have everything we need. The check was endorsed to the family shelter the next day, with a note requesting it be used for educational programs for resident children. Over time, limited relationships formed with both sets of grandparents. Cautious, measured connections built on the children's terms. There were holiday dinners and graduation celebrations, but never the easy intimacy that should have been their birthright. The grandparents witnessed the accomplished young adults Maya and Ethan had become, but they would never truly know the resilient children who had survived extraordinary loss and betrayal. As for me, I never fully trusted them again. I was cordial, even kind, but the mother bear inside me remained vigilant, protecting the family we had rebuilt from the ashes of abandonment. On the day Maya passed the bar exam, 12 years after we'd stood homeless on the sidewalk outside our former home, she called me first. "I did it, Mom," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'm going to be the lawyer I promised to become." That night, we celebrated with Ethan, who had graduated with a degree in education and youth counseling, inspired by the coaches and teachers who had supported him through his darkest days. As we raised our glasses in our modest dining room, a far cry from the Victorian home James and I had once lovingly restored, but filled with more security and peace than those grander walls had ultimately provided, I felt James's presence more strongly than I had in years. "To Dad," Ethan said, his voice deep and sure, "who would be so proud of us." "To Mom," Maya countered, her eyes shining as she looked at me, "who carried us when we couldn't walk, who believed in us when no one else did." I shook my head, overwhelmed by their love. "To us," I corrected softly. "To the family that couldn't be broken. Not by grief, not by betrayal, not by hardship." Later that evening, as the children cleared dishes and bickered good-naturedly about whose turn it was to wash versus dry, I stepped onto our small back porch and looked up at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed our lowest moments now oversaw our triumph. "We made it, James," I whispered to the night sky. "Not the way we planned, but we made it." The loss of James had taken everything from us, our home, our security, our place in the world. His parents had taken what little remained, and my own family had closed their doors when we needed them most. But they couldn't take what mattered most, the unbreakable bonds between us, the strength we found in each other, the knowledge that love, real love, doesn't arrive with conditions or disappear in adversity. We had built something precious from nothing. And in the end, that was everything.